If you've been anywhere on the internet in a gaming adjacent space, you've been seeing the headlines about 2XKO, Riot's fighting game that after only 3 weeks post console launch is already laying off half of their development team, which is around 80 developers being laid off. Headlines here like saying Riot's new fighting game is already imploding. And Jeff Keighley even weighed in on the action. And basically everywhere you look, people are getting in on this because, layoffs and the state of the gaming industry is a very hot topic in the gaming social media sphere, as a lot of game developers are shutting down, and the industry as a whole has been facing a lot of struggles around keeping developers employed. And in general, there's been a lot of questions about the industry as a whole. And yesterday, people logged onto Twitter to see this post on the Riot Games account, not on the 2XKO account, on the big Papa Riot Games account, saying an update on 2XKO. And if you pulled up this announcement, you saw from the producer of 2XKO themselves, Tom Cannon, that they are actually going to be downsizing the team, laying off 50% of the dev team. And they say here, after a lot of discussion and reflection, we are reducing the size of the 2XKO team. With a smaller focused team, we're going to dig in and make key improvements to the game, including some of the things we've already heard you asking for. We'll share some of our plans soon. So they try to let you know that the dev team is definitely decreasing in size, but they go on to say that they're not, ending 2XKO. It's not immediately reaching end of service right now, immediately after it finally fully released with a 1.0 version. But it does not build confidence going into this game that actually was finally in the hands of a large portion of the player base for the very first time just 3 weeks ago. But if you're hearing this news now, your first thought might be, what the hell is a 2XKO? Which is a big part of the problem with the story of this game, because most people saw this news and said, wait, League of Legends, Riot, they made a fighting game? There's a League of Legends fighting game? Shout out to my boy Robin Songs here on the left. He was just tweeting about Riot Games a few hours before the announcement went out about 2XKO having the dev layoffs, and they're going here. Riot Games is the best company of all time. League of Legends, pioneer game in esports and modern culture. TFT, best strategy game of all time. Valorant, best shooter of all time. Arcane, best animated show of all time. Riftbound, best card game of all time. He's signing off on this, glazing everything Riot's ever put out, except he doesn't even know that Riot had already released a fighting game called 2XKO. Literally, even Riot's biggest glazer does not know that Riot had a fully fledged released fighting game for consoles and PC. And Oni Smoke here talking to Incross. The amount of people saying that they just found out 2XKO release upon reading today's news says it all. And then they say, me telling my FPS friends about 2XKO and them asking, what's that? Lol. I tell them it's a fighting game with League characters, and they say, wait, that sounds fire. Maybe they should have named it something else. So, yes, there's a lot of things going on here. Most people are finding out today with these layoffs. This is the most biggest viral story and biggest marketing opportunity the game has had since its inception over a decade ago. But if you don't know, this story goes back, yes, over a decade. This was a over decade long story in the making. So in this video, we're going to break down exactly what went wrong with 2XKO, the complete history of it, so you can get the full picture of how did Riot even get into the fighting game space to begin with, and how did this team get laid off with only 3 weeks post-launch from such a massive developer. So we're going to break down the complete history so that we can answer all the questions around this news story in case you're seeing the name 2XKO and you have no idea what's going on. We're going to make it easy to follow in this video. Now, 2XKO, it's been around for quite some time, and it's actually already on its way out 3 weeks after launch. But if you want to have the full breakdown, we actually go further into detail about this on the podcast. I'm going to give a quick little plug. Trash Talk is the YouTube channel. We have a show in there, Extra Trashy. Tomorrow, on Wednesday, there will be a full length episode on there, long form content discussing this development, the future of 2XKO, and our predictions with my co-host Idom. So if you want to check out the long form, you can head over to Trash Talk FGC. But let's get back to the video here today. So let's bring you all the way back to 2015. Go back a decade with me, and let's check out a little game called Rising Thunder. This game was a small indie prototype alpha title, which featured a 1v1 game with a handful of characters with these rock'em sock'em robot inspired characters that was a easy to pick up, easy to follow indie fighting game. And the big thing about this that made it very unique for the time was that it did not use motion controls, meaning you activated your specials sort of like in Smash Brothers. You held a direction and pressed a special button. But beyond that, what was unique about these controls is that they were on cooldowns, something very similar and familiar to people who use or play League of Legends. Yeah, the special moves had a cooldown mechanic, which was like the very unique thing. So this kind of caught the eye of a lot of different members of the fighting game community at the time, and kind of caught wind a bit more than you would see for indie fighting games at this era. And that was for no fluke, really, because this game was developed by some of the biggest members of the fighting game community, some of the most important and prominent members of the fighting game community. So we have on the left the Cannon brothers, Tom and Tony Cannon, and they were as founding members of the studio that produced this title, and they're incredibly important to the history of the fighting game community. Major contributions to fighting games that you play to this day. They developed themselves GGPO, the Rollback Network SDK. GGPO is the basis for rollback netcode, which is the basis for every major fighting game title today, aside from a few exceptions, leverage some form of rollback netcode that can be traced back to GGPO technology. This enabled online play between two opponents in a much more lag-free environment, because rather than just delaying the inputs for the game, introducing input delay to make up for the latency between two players, it also featured rollback mechanics, which would actually roll back and synchronize the state between two separate clients to keep things in time, so that you can allow the clients to be out of sync, not introduce input delay, and just roll back and predict the state of the game and allow for a much more seamless online experience. Prior to GGPO and rollback netcode, online gaming for fighting games was ass, and that was part of the culture where you actually had to physically meet up with people, either play in arcades or in offline meetups, to have a true lag-free experience, because the online play introduced so much input delay that it was quite frankly a different realm, different genre of gaming. On top of that, they also founded and started EVO, the biggest tournament series, period, for fighting games ever to this day. They no longer work on GGPO or EVO directly themselves, but these two guys have done an incredible amount of work in revolutionizing the FGC. That cannot be understated. And also on the right, working on Rising Thunder, was Seth Killian. Along with being probably my favorite fighting game tournament commentator of all time, he was a big, heavy influence in the release of Street Fighter 4 and was working as a Capcom community manager in that game. But also, apparently, he had his words were in the ear of Ono at the time, apparently, and he had some influence in the design direction of the game. And Street Fighter 4 ended up revolutionizing and revitalizing the fighting game community as it is today. I would not be here without Street Fighter 4. And he also worked on other FGC titles like Dive Kick, an indie fighting game title. And it's just been a big part of fighting game culture for many years. So these guys founded Radiant Entertainment, working on Rising Thunder. Rising Thunder and Radiant Entertainment were then purchased by Riot Games in 2016. Rising Thunder goes offline. That's when things start to get interesting. Now, why would Riot Games, out of nowhere, come by and purchase up this studio? Were they just trying to squash out the competition? Were they scared about their title Stonehearth and this Rising Thunder game in these genres? Probably not. They probably wanted to build on top of these prototypes and bring them into the fold of the Riot Games universe. So this became a big news story that Riot Games acquires Rising Thunder and Stonehearth Studio Radiant Entertainment. And this is when the speculation begins. In the fighting game community, you have to understand, we're not Riot Games, okay? Things are a little bit different. This is what the 2016 League of Legends World Championships look like. At this time, 2016, esports is in full force. I mean, venture capitalists are pouring millions upon millions of dollars, funding insane salaries for top-level players. Developers are pushing for esports. There's speculation that esports is going to be bigger than the Super Bowl. Like, this is the next big thing that's going to take over the world. It is full steam ahead, gravy train going. Absolute insanity that people are expecting esports to be the biggest thing ever. Obviously, we've seen that bubble has popped since then, but that was the world we were living in at the time. Meanwhile, in the FGC, we were playing Melty Blood in the bathrooms for grand finals, right? Like, it was just not really the same thing. Like, this is the classic stereotype for fighting game players, that it's just a poverty genre. Obviously, this is like next level. It's not like this across the board, but generally it's a community scene driven by passion, not necessarily by the monetary incentive for competing, because there was very little money in the fighting game community, and it was mostly disconnected tournaments run by local organizers that people met up to play. And yeah, there was a handful of top players that made a living being a professional player, but for the most part, that wasn't really the case. Now, there was esports initiatives in the fighting game community, mainly with Street Fighter, and at this time, Street Fighter 4 just concluded, and we're going into the era of Street Fighter 5. And if you compare 2016 Street Fighter 5 to 2016 League of Legends, you can see that it's just orders of magnitude different. Street Fighter 5 for 2016 had the biggest prize pool we had ever seen in the fighting game community, and that was $250,000 for first place, with $350,000 total in the prizing. And for League of Legends, they had over $5 million, right? So just, you could not compare this. So when we see in the community at this time that Riot, who is putting out tournaments with over $5 million, is buying a studio that is founded and owned by the Cannon brothers and Seth Killian, who made a fighting game prototype, people start letting their imaginations run wild. They're seeing dollar signs, ka-ching, like people's imaginations are going crazy at this time. There's speculation about Riot producing a fighting game that's going to take over the entire community. It's going to dethrone Capcom as being the king of the FGC, and Street Fighter is going to be donezo, and they're going to be signing exclusive contracts to esports players, and they're going to be full-time Riot fighting game specialists, and it's going to make full-time careers, and an entire industry is going to form around this Riot fighting game. This is where the imaginations are starting to run crazy before there is even a game that existed at all. And yet also to understand at this time, Street Fighter 5 was not very well received. Street Fighter 4 ended on a high note. It was a game that was growing year after year with a lot of community enthusiasm. And at the same time, they were building up the esports initiative with the Capcom Cup. Street Fighter 5 releases, though, to almost universal condemnation. It released far too early. It was glitchy, buggy, lacked content. It was just underbaked and not finished. And that led to a sort of power vacuum in the FGC, where a lot of people were looking for something new to come and replace Street Fighter 5 at this time. So, people were hungry for change and hungry for someone to kind of shake up the status quo in the fighting game community. And Dr. Danny Pham here, my man, pulled up this old 4chan post with the recent news. This is a post from 2016. It'll be funny to see Street Fighter 5 fully die once Riot's new game is revealed. The irony is, for all the shit talk the FGC does against anime games, those will be the only fighters with any kind of fan base left, aside from NRS garbage, once Riot's games hits. 10 years ago, this was the actual mentality that you would see in pockets of the FGC. This was the kind of discourse that was going on. Keep in mind, still no game announced, just the purchase of a studio. Keep that in mind. But a few years later, you have it. It's real. The speculation is starting to come to fruition. We have the very first look at what would become the actual Riot fighting game. They did purchase that studio that produced Rising Thunder for a real reason. It's a real game. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Project L. This is the first look that we had in 2019, 3 years rather, after the purchase of Radiant Entertainment, of the early development of Project L. And if you were paying attention to 2XKO at all, you notice it looks very different. It has a completely different art style. It's more of this like paint smear art style, impressionist art style, which I actually really like. I think it looks great, to be quite honest. And if you pay close attention as well, it's also a 1v1 fighting game. And you can see it's like Darius fighting Ari, and also like another champion, another character here that I'm not as familiar with, that really has not released in 2XKO. But it's real. And once again, the imagination start going wild. People start popping off. Project L, we have a fighting game. We have the Cannon brothers there talking to us directly. They're from the FGC. Riot is going to save the fighting game community. And then COVID, right? It had already been years since they purchased the studio. It took 3 years to get a small snippet of a prototype of a project without a full name. And then COVID hits in 2020, and things start going sideways for the entire planet. So it would be a few years before we get another update regarding Project L. And at this time, there's been some changes in the FGC. Like Street Fighter V was slowly starting to redeem itself and was getting into high gear with the DLC because of delays to Street Fighter VI due to COVID. And at the same time, games like Dragon Ball FighterZ released and became one of the major players. That power vacuum that Street Fighter V left kind of left an opportunity for other games to step up, like Dragon Ball FighterZ. Guilty Gear comes out and becomes a really big game during this time. The world and the world of fighting games themselves is changing rapidly. At the same time, esports, this fully popped the bubble for esports, so things are not looking the same like they were in 2016. But finally, 2021, 5 years after Riot purchases Radiant Entertainment, we have another update about Project L. They're back, this time with a brand new art style and with a brand new game almost entirely. In this dev post, Tom Cannon comes back and says, "We're excited to share that Project L will be a tag team style fighting game." And they also are leaning really into this common sentiment in the community at the time about games being too easy. Like a real big part of the fighting game community is always romanticizing older titles and talking about the lowering of skill ceilings and the lowering of skill floors to make it so that it's too easy to get randomed out. It's too easy for a scrub to beat a pro. And they're really leaning into this in this time of the marketing. One of the go-to lines they had is, they say here in the blog post itself, with an easy-to-learn but hard-to-master mentality. And from the video, Tom Cannon says, "This isn't about building a game where new players have a chance to beat the pros. It's about unlocking the fun at all skill levels." There's a bit of tongue-in-cheek there for sure, leaning into common discourse in the community at this time about it being too easy to be randomed out in modern fighting games. So they're coming out and saying this is going to be a serious competitive game, but it's going to be fun at all levels. It's going to be a tag team style fighting game, completely different art style, completely different type of game from the 1v1 game that they showed early when Project L was first announced. And they're also flexing their rollback technology because not only are they, developers who actually created GGPO, they're going to step that up with Riot's networking technology to create the best online experience possible because this is COVID. People are primarily playing fighting games online, and not having supreme and excellent netcode is a death sentence for these fighting game titles at the time. So they're really leaning into this, and there's like a lot of positive feeling in the hardcore fighting game community about this. It's like, oh shit, like they're hitting all the boxes for what we need at this time. We need a hardcore fighting game, fun for all levels, but like the pros will always win, needs to be good online. Like, yeah, people are feeling pretty good. But there's a little bit of concern here. Wasn't this going to be a 1v1 fighting game? Why is it about to be a tag team fighting game? We'll touch on that in a little bit as well. But the conversation continues, right? I found these Reddit posts from 4 or 5 years ago. A lot of people see Project L as a second coming of Christ. I do not believe it will be a bad game, not at all, but some people really need to chill about it. And then this person replies, "Project L is definitely poised to create the next big fighting game, and boom, similar to Street Fighter 4 and DBFZ. The bar is so low that all it needs is to be a solid, fun fighting game, and it'll already be top of the market since free-to-play, rollback netcode, and long-term developer support is already guaranteed." I don't know about that last one, man. I don't know about that last one anymore. Riot will have to drop the ball hard for the game to not be a huge success. And I do agree with the whole save the FGC. Hype Train needs to chill, though, since the post says the FGC isn't doing bad enough that it needs saving. So this was a common attitude at the time, right? This idea of save the FGC. People were really on the hype train still at this point in 2021, 5 years after Rising Thunder was purchased. It's been a long time at this point, and we just found out it went from 1v1 to a 2v2 fighting game. Some evolution, some pivoting of the direction of the game along the way. But time goes on, and the world of fighting games is also still evolving as time keeps moving. Street Fighter VI eventually comes out in 2023, and it is a smashing success. That window of opportunity where Street Fighter V kind of dropped the ball in the beginning of its release and let the power vacuum is fully filled at this point, right? DBFZ came out, Guilty Gear Strive came out, A lot of solid titles. Tekken 7 took up a lot of space in the fighting game community. And then Street Fighter 6 comes out. Boom! It is a smash success. It's a fully fledged release. Content filled, feature rich, great online play. And then it's just dominating in the community itself. It's growing in the Western audience, and then eventually explodes in Japan exponentially as well. And EVO 2023 becomes the largest EVO and potentially offline gaming tournament period of all time, with 7,000 people entering, which is an insane number for Street Fighter 6 or for EVO in general. And that Street Fighter 6 is here, baby. It's the king, and it still is the king right now in the fighting game community, and is blowing up even more out in Japan. So, where is 2XKO at this time? It's been 2 years since they announced that they're doing a tag fighter. Well, 2XKO introducing duo play. So now, at this time, not only did they finally change from Project L to 2XKO, they announced that it's going to be a 2v2 game, in the sense that if you so choose, you can actually play either 1v1, 1v2, or 2v2. It is a tag fighting game where, typically the most competitive mode will be one player versus one player, but you can opt also to have a separate player on your team control another character and try to synergize with your opponent and synchronize your tagging and play as a team, which is a very creative concept that had already been done, by the way, that had already been done by Street Fighter Cross Tekken. But because tagging was such a more fluid mechanic in this game, it definitely incentivized a lot more back and forth with your teammates. And it kind of made sense, right? If they're going for the League of Legends experience, League of Legends is exclusively a team-based game. So it kind of fit with the whole vibe of doing a League fighter. And I think there was a lot of positive reception to that, where it's like, okay, tag game, you can play 1v1 and also have the option for duos and teams. This could be something. You could be cooking something up. And of course, they were at that EVO. That EVO where Street Fighter was running the show, man. 7,000 entrants. Their presence in the community is everywhere, right? They have playable builds of the game now out in public. So if you show up at these events, you can sit down and play 2XKO. They got the booths. They got boots on the ground for the developers and the team out there promoting the game. They got the arcade sticks for the branding. They have arcade cabs with 2XKO branding. They have these builds out in the hands of people or getting feedback and promoting the game with old school boots on the ground in the fighting game community marketing. And go on to 2024. They're still kind of continuing in this process of trying to get the hands out, get the game into the hands of the people without fully releasing the game itself. In 2024, they started doing these alpha labs. So for people on PC, you finally got your hands on the game itself, and people had a lot of feedback from that. And, people are starting to form their opinions. They have the Alpha Lab 2 as well. If you go to EVO Japan, you can get your hands on the build. If you go to EVO Vegas again in 2025, you can get your hands on the latest builds. They keep updating the game, and they keep giving people access if you are in the Alpha Labs, if you happen to get a code, if you happen to have a PC, maybe if you're, a pro player, maybe you get a little bit more hands-on time in the game. Slowly, the game is both accessible and inaccessible at the same time. It's both exposed and also unplayable. Over time, more and more people are playing the game, streaming it, footage out there. And at the same time, a lot of people are sitting at the sidelines observing without being able to play the game. Keep in mind, a huge portion of the hardcore fighting game audience exclusively plays on console. Now, a lot of the League audience, of course, exclusively plays on PC because they're playing League of Legends. You are a PC audience. But for fighting games, they went from arcades to consoles for the most part. A lot of people do play on PC, but a huge portion of the fighting game community plays still to this day exclusively on consoles. So there's a couple things going on here where there's a bit of discontent brewing, where people who don't have access to the games are feeling a bit stiff, feeling a bit like, hey, I'm out. I'm not on the inside. I'm not in the club. I don't have clout. I don't have privilege to get access to this. I'm from a different country that I can't even attend these events. I can't afford to go to EVO. And at the same time, they're getting bored watching the game be optimized and developed by the community, and the discovery period where people are figuring out how to play the game is happening before their eyes without them being a part of it. And also people are kind of judging the game itself. Like, it's getting a lot of scrutiny at this time. And here's where it's important to keep in mind, like, what people expect from a fighting game. The big three, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, and Street Fighter 6, are the big three because they have been doing it the biggest for the longest. They are established fighting game IPs that survive from the initial wave of fighting games. Street Fighter 2 kind of set the genre and kickstarted it. It set the standards. And then Street Fighter managed to survive through its lull with Street Fighter 3 into Street Fighter 4. Mortal Kombat also escaped and became like the American-developed fighting game. Tekken as well for the premier 3D fighting game. And these IPs now are a name brand in and of themselves, and they sell the most copies. And a big thing about these fighting games is, for one, none of them are free-to-play products. They come fully fledged with story modes, arcade modes, training modes, and then all the multiplayer options as well. They're not specifically focused on just competitive multiplayer or specifically only an esports focus, like something like a League of Legends would be. And the other thing about them is gameplay-wise, they're all usually 1v1 fighting games. They're usually 1v1 fighting games. I know the latest Mortal Kombat entry has assists, and that's actually a little bit controversial in the MK community, but they get their sales in other ways, right? Generally, the sales come from people who just like the art of the game, the energy, the presentation, the supers, the story mode. There's a lot of casual appeal to these titles, aside from just simply the competitive side of the gameplay itself. Meanwhile, this is what 2XKO looks like. So this was one clip I could find to easily embed in this, and this is like the most tame sequence you can think of for 2XKO. This is a 2v2 game with characters like Echo, who has a rewind ability to set up like 15-way mix-ups into tag launchers, into your assist to keep the combo going, into pretty much touch-of-death combos, right? The amount of damage you can dish out and the amount of complexity with the tag mechanics that this game could actually end up with is absurd, which in some ways is actually a positive thing, right? Like there's people who really enjoy that. But on the other hand, you could make an argument that it ends up developing in such a way that it harms the visual clarity and it raises the barrier to entry for most people. Instead of having to learn one character and how they operate versus your opponent's characters, you have to learn two characters, how they synergize, and how they operate against two other characters and their synergy as well. So it's a bit of a hardcore fighting game in that sense, and that potentially could be off-putting. Potentially. 2XKO is joining the ranks of being a tag fighter, and tag fighters historically are like a niche within a niche. I would say the typical fighting game is a 1v1 fighting game, and then there is a subset of fighting games that have assists in them where you're able to pick a team of characters, call assists. And some of these games are revered and loved games in the world of fighting games and beyond, right? Like, look at Marvel vs. Capcom 3, MVC2, Dragon Ball FighterZ. These were very successful fighting games that people really do enjoy, even at a casual level outside of the hardcore fighting game community. But 2XKO is not just a tag fighter. It's an active tag fighter. This is like being a niche within a niche within a niche. Because what's left on the screen here is the active tag fighter, some examples I could think up of, and these games are for fucking sickos. Active tag is one of the most mind-bending, insane mechanics that has ever been introduced into a fighting game. It has become kind of like this goal for developers post-MVCI. MVCI was one of the first games to really go into this mechanic, along with Blast Blue Cross Tag Battle, and it's just fucking crazy. It's just a crazy mechanic. It really lets sickos who enjoy hardcore, fucked up offense and insane combos go crazy with the game engine. And that can be really, really cool. It can also be seen as really, really oppressive and visually hard to follow with a lot of clutter on the screen. I don't think that's that big of a deal to me personally for a casual appeal, but that could be that's a factor to consider here. It's a factor to consider here. Active tag is when you're able to both call an assist and then swap into that assist at any point in time, meaning you can kind of ping pong between two characters a lot more freely, which leads to a lot more aggressive and complex mix-ups and combo conversions. I'm not going to get too much into the details with that, but just know that this is a game that enables sickos to do sick things in their fighting games. It lets you have a lot of freedom to the point where you can do really fucked up things. Active tag fighters, if that sounds good to you, you want to check them out. Now, the other thing about those games I mentioned before is that a lot of people are trying to play for the story, man. The big three, they got story modes. Mortal Kombat sells like fucking crazy because everyone cares about the story mode. Casual people love Mortal Kombat for the gore. They want to boot it up, play the story mode, do a couple fatalities, call it a day. Mortal Kombat is actually really not popular in the competitive FGC. However, in terms of a business move, it makes a shit ton of money because they sell the most copies. They sell the most copies to the most casual players, who lines the pockets of Warner Brothers and keeps the franchise alive. Meanwhile, in their tournament following, Mortal Kombat actually does not have a very active competitive community, and it tends to fall off very quickly. And right now, it's really struggling in the fighting game community. But as a business, it definitely gets a lot of playthrough, right? Like, it gets a lot of people into the story mode, and it sells a lot of copies. So having that casual content moves copies of the game. It's something that sells the game. Meanwhile, come back to 2XKO. As these alphas are going on, as these beta, we're getting closer and closer to a potential beta. This game is already confirmed to not have story mode, right? It's going to be like League of Legends, focused on competitive multiplayer. That's fine. Okay. Well, there's other ways to get content too. There's content in just terms of characters. A lot of these team games, look at the Marvel vs. Capcom series. This has a lot of beloved characters in these franchises. You have Marvel characters, you have Capcom characters. Having them go at it is crazy. It just it's like really like a brain bender. Being a kid and picking Hulk and Iron Man and having them do supers to each other, and seeing that in Arcade or MVC3, just crazy clash of characters, and they do crazy things, and there's a lot of options and variants to choose from. But then 2XKO confirms that at launch, they're only having 10 characters. So not only do they not have the casual content in terms of like a story mode and other more casual ways to engage with the engine of the game itself, they have 10 characters. And this is confirmed in 2025. 10 years after Rising Thunder, 6 years after the first teaser for Project L, it is confirmed that the game will be releasing with 10 characters for a 2v2 fighting game, meaning you have to use at least 2 of the characters on your team when you play the game, which will lead to so many repeat interactions and less variety in the gameplay experience, and even worse, I would argue, in the spectating experience. Now, of course, the plan is to continue to release new characters, and I think they were aiming for about 5 characters a year was the initial goal with this rollout, get the game to the hands of the people and start rolling out games. But that was a huge blow to the hype and potential spectator ability and viewability of the game itself. And it's really a strange thing to see in a franchise like League of Legends that has over 170 characters at this point. There is such a rich amount of history and lore to pull from that they've been developing over the years. You got only 10 characters to choose from. And on top of this, something that I have come to learn is that there's a big rift in the League community between League fans and Arcane fans. This is something that I am not privy to. Listen, I don't play League of Legends. I did not watch Arcane. This is not the world I'm into. 2XKO did one thing right, and it got me to pay attention to League of Legends. I never really gave a shit about League of Legends at all. But apparently, hardcore League players kind of hate how much Riot has been pushing Arcane as an IP, and characters that are in the Arcane universe seem to be taking over a lot of the focus and collaborations and recent releases. So there's another issue where a lot of the characters in this 10 character roster are Arcane characters, which pissed off a lot of League players. Like this started to become more of a drama thing where people are like, why is this an Arcane fighter? Why is it all Arcane? I want some classic League characters in there. There's a lot more popular picks. So even within the community that they're trying to potentially target outside of the fighting game community, it became more drama. We're like, hey, I don't have my character. I don't have the character that I relate to, that I want. I'm really attached to, and that would drive my passionate engagement with this game, because fighting games are really about like really relating and connecting with their characters. Same thing with like a League of Legends, right? And especially fighting games, I would argue, even more so. It's not a genre with character bands and a team roster. You pick your game. Some people are ride or die with one character for life, for a game or a franchise's life cycle, lifespan. They stick with one character. If you don't have that character for someone, they might drop your game entirely. It can make or break a player's participation. So having only 10 characters and pissing off a lot of people from the game that you're basing, the IP that you're basing the game off of, is already kind of like failing to capture the audience. Because the typical strategy for a fighting game based on an IP, hey, Dragon Ball FighterZ came out, you got Goku, get Goku in there, get Vegeta, get Frieza, get Piccolo, get all the fan favorites in the game from a beloved franchise like Dragon Ball, and people will buy the game and play it even if they don't know a damn thing about the fighting game genre. And Dragon Ball FighterZ did that incredibly successfully and sold millions. And then from that derived an esports scene from the secondary hardcore audience that stuck with the game and learned the main mechanics. And some of those casual players who did not know anything about fighting games or the fighting game community or the esports scene ended up playing, a small percentage of them ended up playing competitively because they just loved the game, right? That's generally the net that you're casting with these products. But 2XKO is an esports product first without the casual appeal, and you're starting to see the cracks form as we're getting closer and closer to the release. So after all these weird alpha labs and like this unequal access for people who are at events, and like there's developer builds leaking out in the wild, there's concerns about competitive integrity with top players getting too much access behind closed doors, they finally come out with a closed beta on September 9th, 2025, and this will be available globally on PC. Once again, not available on consoles. And normally this wouldn't be an issue. League players are all on PC, so it should still be active, should be popping, not a problem. But remember, the fighting game community is largely on console. Jay Snyder here, MVC3 2011 Evo Champ, even commented about this when they didn't have any announcement about console release during the closed beta for 2XKO. He said, I try to refrain from being negative on social media these days, but we're working hard on console. It's not an update, and the fact that they can't give a roadmap or any real details is almost an insult. There's literally no chance for me to compete at this game, being now 3 months behind, and it's looking like it's going to be another 4+ months behind. I don't know if I was ever going to be good at this game, or if I'm too old now, but at this point, it's irrelevant. When's Tokon, referring to Marvel Tokon, an upcoming fighting game based on the Marvel franchise by the other fighting game developer in the scene right now, Arxis, who made Dragon Ball FighterZ, right? So even hardcore fighting game players are starting to be fed up with this lack of access because, yeah, if it's a competitive focused game and I'm multiple months behind because I'm only on console, what's the point? How can I even compete? How can I catch up to those hundreds to thousands of hours that other people have at that time? And this is also where you start to see this weird, the game is released, but the game is not released, sort of status quo going on, because the closed beta rolled straight into early access a few weeks after the closed beta began. So it was about 2 or 3 weeks where they did closed beta on PC, and then they just decided to update it and call it early access, but it's still not available on console. This is also starting to lead to confusion where people don't know if the game is released or not. They have no idea. Meanwhile, there is zero awareness of this game's existence outside of the fighting game community. They are marketing it heavily with the pro fighting game scene, with the hardcore fighting game community. They're at the fighting game events. They're active on Twitter. And keep in mind, a large part of the dev team is from the community itself, right? The Cannon brothers themselves are OG founding members of the fighting game community. And a lot of the champ designers, QA, a lot of the people working top to bottom on this game are hardcore competitive fighting game players who now have a job in the industry. So it makes sense that they're really tight-knit with this small niche community, but it's not grabbing the attention of anyone outside of this, nor is it grabbing attention from the greater league community, which has millions of players compared to the thousands of players that fighting games have. I mean, they tried. There was an attempt. 2XKO is literally in the Riot client when you go to launch the games. Like, it's there. You can see it. But most League players just autopilot into League. They don't think about the Riot client at all. But it's there. You know, you can see the icon. It's in the bottom left. But for the most part, it's like not working, it seems like. And even during the closed beta, here's some stream charts that tracked the most viewership. All of the streamers who had the most viewership during these closed betas and early access were all fighting game or fighting game adjacent streamers. The only one I would argue who's not FGC is Northern Lion here, who had very few total hours streamed of the game, but because he just has so much viewership, he jumped to the 5th place position here in this chart. So it's already looking a little funky. Where is the Tyler 1? Where is all the big League streamers? The League streamers have far, far, far more viewership. I mean, go to any fighting game on Twitch right now compared to League of Legends. The League of Legends category destroys fighting game viewership across the board 24/7. None of the League players have even considered dabbling in this game and giving it the promo that it needs. Because once again, this is a free-to-play fighting game. It's going to need a player base to sustain its population and to drive sales to cosmetics in order to actually pay for the development costs and make a profit. And once again, talking about the player counts here, here's Tekken 8, right? Like 46,000 all-time peak on Steam charts, 6,000 24-hour peak. Compare that to number of monthly League of Legends players, it's in the hundreds of millions. Like, it's just, you can't compare this shit. It doesn't, there's no comparison whatsoever. League as an IP, as an active game, just absolutely shits on the entire genre of fighting games, every game in it combined. It's just completely different world. So the fact that it's only so far reaching the already core fighting game audience and not reaching external to that, to the greater League audience who loves the IP and pulling them into the fold, is definitely worrying at this time. So you start seeing people talk about low player counts, people talking about empty lobbies because you're supposed to go to a lobby in order to actually queue up for matches. This digital avatar lobby where you sit down next to the caps and actually play people, you queue up there, like trying to mimic the hardcore arcade experience that fighting game players go through in real life. And you start to see these discussions, like people are starting to notice that, hey, it feels like there's not as much engagement going on with this game as you might have expected. Remember, this is now 2025. It's been 6 years since the first announcement of Project L. People were talking about Riot and Project L, the League of Legends fighting game is going to save the FGC. Back in 2016, people thought this was going to blow Street Fighter out of the water and be far more active and have far more opportunities in esports and build careers. The reality is starting to not shape up with that much engagement. And I felt this firsthand. I played the game and I actually enjoyed it myself. Content I produced around the game got significantly less viewership than any other fighting game ever. Ever since I started to have an active YouTube channel, I've done content for Tekken 7, Tekken 8, DNF Duel, Guilty Gear Strive, Avatar, what any random fighting game that's released that I dabble with for a couple weeks. All of them got significantly more engagement and viewership across Twitch and YouTube videos than 2XKO. Something about the game, even for the hardcore FGC, is starting to not generate the buzz even within the niche, much less pulling League of Legends players out here. So people are starting to notice. However, we carry on. We do have the console launch. Finally, with short notice, they announced that the console launch is occurring on January 20th, 2026. And, you know, it's free to play. So when it drops out, hey, it released. Hey, it's on PS5. And you can see on the PS5 charts that it's actually number 3 in US and Canada behind Fortnite and Roblox, which pretty good. You know, it's hard to beat Roblox and Fortnite. At this point, people have already started to temper their expectations a little bit because they're like, okay, this shit is not like blowing the roof off of the fighting game genre, but maybe it can be a solid slow burn of a release. And now it's actually officially released, even though it was in a weird amorphous state where it had been visible and played for 2 years since 2023, 2024 with all these alpha labs and betas. Now it's available to the world, and maybe it can build momentum with its free to play, no cost to entry, and build an organic following over time. But, you know, is that guaranteed? We've seen this before, right? This whole time, there was another fighting game that went down a similar trajectory. Multiversus was Warner Brothers' attempt to do a Smash clone with their massive amounts of various IPs all under one label. And Multiversus released as a free-to-play platform fighter, which had monetization around costumes, cosmetics, and characters. And it had a lot of buzz in the beginning. It actually had a lot more buzz than 2XKO did upon initial release. This thing even won Fighting Game of the Year in early access. It then died, was revived, and died again. And along the way, it had major gameplay overhauls, altering everything from character balance to combo systems to gameplay speed and the likes. It was struggling to change every dial it possibly could to figure out what would make people stick. And the comparisons between 2XKO and Multiversus were happening a lot. A lot of people got defensive about this, but it was hard to not see, like, hey, like the last time we had a major publisher come into somewhat of an adjacent fighting game fold and tried to make something happen here, it ended up with a colossal failure, and Multiversus eventually just went offline and hasn't been online for, I believe, a couple years at this point. So people were still concerned at this point, but there's still hope. There's still hope. We have a lot of issues to go through, but there's still hope. I actually forgot about all these controversies. I'm just going to do a rapid fire of all the other controversies that were surrounding this game's official console release at this time. I think people were finally reaching a head with the pro player privilege. People were concerned about how many pro players were having access to pre-release content. People were complaining about the monetization in the game, $100 Arcane skins. There was backlash about a Twitch sponsorship gone wrong. There was concerns about the direction of the gameplay. The developers who are in constant communication with the community were talking about making big changes, big swings to the core gameplay. The balance issues with only 10 characters in the game. Yasuo and Echo are running the show. They're pretty much in every tournament match, leading to fatigue from viewership as well, which of course is exasperated by the fact that there's only 10 characters, 12 characters now in the game. And then of course the console launch itself was not flawless. Tons and tons of screen tearing on PS5. So a lot of issues surrounding the release at this time. But there's hope with Frosty Fostings. Look, at this point in the game's lifespan, it is so clear this game is not resonating with the League of Legends audience. And it's barely even resonating. It's hanging on by a thread within the core FGC. But maybe we can slowly build an organic following and an organic, sustainable future through these tournaments, put on a hype show, get people interested in the game, and slowly build something. Get some viral moments, get something to get the people excited, share clips of the game, and slowly build the awareness among the greater gaming community. Frosty Fostings is a FGC community-run tournament. This is as grassroots as it gets here. For 2XKO, Riot is not doing a full professional tour. However, for this season, they promised to do a championship circuit where they only put in prize money. They're not actually doing like a tour finals or anything like crowning a grand champion at the end, but they're just supporting local tournaments to try to get engagement up in these events and kind of support the players and the scene itself. So $50,000, chump change to League of Legends players, but this is huge money. For fighting game players, ka-ching. I mean, this is like big money. People are going for that Riot payday, man. They can pay me $20 and a bologna sandwich, and I'll get on that plane to compete like my life depends on it. So Frosty Fostings might be an opportunity for positive buzz in the community. And you know what? I think it really kind of was. The tournament ended up being really enjoyable to watch. There was a decent enough character variety in the top 8. The gameplay was high energy, wasn't causing people's eyes to glaze over. Bleed, 16 years old, was a new fighting game champion. Really good storyline there. Sonic Fox and Enzem entered as a duo and made top 8, so people got to see that there was a potential for 1 versus 2 gameplay, showing off a unique aspect to the 2XKO formula. And it had peak viewership of around 41,000 viewers, which is nothing, once again, for League, but for fighting games, that's not bad. That's nothing to scoff at. And it seemed like there could be positive momentum from this, positive top 8, get people interested in the game, and have more people playing 2XKO for a slow burn, a slow momentum build to get this game on the right track until the announcement. 2 weeks after Frosty Fostings, the update hit from Riot Games that half the dev team is being laid off. And this is real shit because, you know, a lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of really good people, and people from the fighting game community itself. Pat the Flip here says 10 years on 2XKO, 12 at Riot, and I got laid off with 30 minutes notice. Gonna take some time. So it hit people pretty hard. But on top of the fact that a lot of good people from the FGC unfortunately lost their jobs, it's not just, you know, people who were working on content that will no longer be relevant or needed. There's some speculation you could argue that this is the typical life cycle for a publisher after a game is released, cut down on the dev team to have a more leaner team to maintain the game going forward once the bulk of the foundational work is done. That is an argument that people could make, and a lot of this could just be pure greed from the developers themselves, because in the fighting game, not just the fighting game, but in the gaming industry period, developers are known for just, completely canning teams, even if they have a smash success on their hands. But you also see here Caroline and Blinkety, lead champ designers who produced most of the characters in the game, were also laid off as well, which does not bode well for the life cycle of the game for producing new characters, which is the expectation for a fighting game, especially one with only 10 currently or 12 currently. Their goal was to have 5 characters a year. Kind of hard to do if you start laying off the character designers who produce a lot of the characters in the game currently. And so it doesn't lead me to assume that there's still going to be a steady stream of content for supporting the game for too long. It leaves a lot of questions in terms of the longevity of the product. Not that this is just a leaning of the dev team to sustain the game for years to come, but that maybe the goal is to just release what is mostly already complete and then slowly transition to end of service a lot sooner than initially expected. So with the full announcement again from Tom Cannon, they talked about that they wanted to make the team a lot more sustainable, and they want to continue to make 2XKO a great product. It's hard to feel confident about that statement in the face of massive amounts of layoffs so shortly after a free-to-play game was released, one that had a decade of development time leading up to it, and has only currently 12 characters to show for it, and does not have that much momentum in terms of engagement from the core FGC, the core target audience, and the adjacent IP that it's attached to. And it's not looking good. I cannot say I feel confident about the future of 2XKO at all from this point. My suspicion is that they're going to release this season of DLC characters, get 5 characters out, and I think that might be it. I think we got a year max of support. I could be totally wrong about that. That's my impression from this, is that this is going to be winding down way sooner than expected. But I could be wrong, and people still plan on playing the game and competing. They're going to be continuing to support the competitive series for 2026, so they'll still have the prize pools for the core FGC. It feels like there's 1 year left. That's my impression. And it's a little sad to see such a strange fumble, but the question also still remains, what happened? What happened? The weird thing about this is that when this news broke, this is by far the most viral engagement opportunity that 2XKO has ever received. This was a major story, far beyond the reaches of anything that organically happens typically within the fighting game community. We had major influencers like Ludwig talking about this, and the responses were, of course, extremely typical for what you would expect. Z-Chrome, game release with next to no marketing. It's been out for what feels like a year now. 80% of characters are targeting the Arcane market rather than the FGC community. Small roster, lack of general hype for what's in the game at the moment. And Vienna VTuber here says, I didn't even know it was released, lol. The thing is, it did have marketing. They had a trailer in the Game Awards. They were at every single fighting game tournament. So within the fighting game niche, you could not escape it. If you were a fighting game player, you literally could not avoid the marketing whatsoever. It was actually over-marketed to a degree. People were complaining about influencers being bought and paid shills, and Inspired, it was so marketed that it started to go the opposite direction, where people were fed up and fatigued from it, and had a very negative reaction to seeing 2XKO, to hearing about it. And at the same time, it was in the Riot client, it was advertised, there was massive trailers put out. There was marketing. I do want to set that record straight. But, what happened? What happened to XKO? Why did it not resonate with anybody until everyone got laid off? In a weird way, I almost suspect that 2XKO could spin the buzz from the layoffs into the most engagement in the game that it's ever seen. It would be a weird, terrible irony if this is actually the moment that got 2XKO to succeed when people started to boot up and hear about the game for the first time. But what actually happened to 2XKO? One, was it lack of marketing? Like I mentioned before, I think this game was marketed, but of course the big issue is that the name fucking sucks. The name is fucking terrible. In every single fighting game that is based on a popular IP, you put the name of the IP in it. 2XKO, people were discussing in the Twitter post and the forum post after this, how do you pronounce 2XKO? They saw 2XKO and they're trying to like phonetically sound it out. 2EX, I saw Texco. People were trying to figure out and decipher the code of what the name is. In case you don't know, 2 times KO, 2XKO is literally a thing that can happen in the game. If you kill both characters at the same time, the announcer goes, 2XKO. It's a thing that can happen in the game. It's like naming your fighting game Perfect KO, which would be a superior name anyways, but it's named after a specific result or game mechanic that occurs in the game instead of being based on the IP. Dragon Ball FighterZ has Dragon Ball in the name. Marvel vs. Capcom has Marvel and Capcom in the name. League of Legends is a massive IP. Project L was a better name than 2XKO. Project L was mysterious, and it had L, which you can then use your inference to determine it's League of Legends, right? It had some kind of like badass energy to it, and that was just a prototype name. That was a temporary project name. Just League of Fighters. Anything else could have been better than that name. And another thing that could have went wrong: poorly estimated expectations. By the way, I'm going in order of what I think was least impactful to most impactful. Let me actually continue on the lack of marketing. Like I mentioned before, I think it was over-marketed. Influencers were brought in nonstop to market the game. You could argue that the marketing angle was wrong. They went after the core FGC audience. I personally was flown out to Santa Monica Studios for Riot Studios to check out the release of their latest fighting game character, and to check out the studio. And everyone there was a fighting game influencer. Everyone there like was engaging with fighting games primarily, and for some reason, there was no cross-pollination outside of the core fighting game community. So I don't know if that was for lack of access and resource or just because they purposely chose that strategy. I'm a little confused about it. It seemed like they wanted to take over the fighting game community, and I don't think that was the strategy to go with. But I would still argue that this game did not falter due to lack of marketing. It was everywhere, especially for a fighting game player. But it was a niche within a niche within a niche. And even a lot of fighting game players rejected this game. Now, poorly estimated expectations. Based on that marketing angle, I have to wonder, did they expect this game to blow up and take over the world when a lot of the marketing was for fighting game specific players and it only had 10 characters and the gameplay is very, very intimidating and steep to get into, and a active tag fighter, which is off-putting to many casual fighting game fans? Every gameplay decision they went down, aside from lack of motion controls, seemed to indicate that they were heading into a direction of being extremely niche in the fighting game space, which is a tiny, tiny, tiny space to begin with. That is fine if your expectations and goals for monetization are targeted towards that. However, this is a free-to-play product. Therefore, it's going to need a large player base to sustain it in order to keep the devs afloat and to be able to sell enough cosmetics and character tokens and all that in order to make a profit. A free-to-play game does not benefit from being niche. Other fighting games from smaller devs can have a niche release because it's a full-price game that the core audience purchases, and they can temper their expectations and budgets accordingly. So it seemed like the gameplay design and the content that was actually released and the marketing didn't align with expectations if the game, after 3 weeks releasing on console and having a successful tournament showing, did not meet expectations based on the wording of that announcement. That, to me, seems very strange. It does not align with the actions taken prior to the actual release. Like I mentioned many times, it's a niche within a niche. I think this is the biggest impact in terms of gameplay, even though I don't rate gameplay that highly on being impactful to why this game did not draw a larger audience. Active tag is crazy to go for if you want this game to be popular with fighting game players. Most fighting game players dabble with Street Fighter or Tekken or Mortal Kombat casually. Like, that's the vast majority of the audience. Dragon Ball Fighters was a tag fighter, but it wasn't an active tag fighter. And they went with the strategy of leaning into the popular IP and providing single-player content. So you have to do one of those to have a chance. Lack of characters and content. I think this is huge. I cannot believe after 10 potential years of dev time, the game released with 10, 12 characters for a 2v2 fighter. I'm not sure what happened internally to cause this to happen. This, to me, is the biggest issue with the core game itself. What the hell, man? 10, 12 characters? That's fucking insane. Like, that is just insane, and it shows. People do not resonate with the cast that was chosen, and their favorite League characters are not in there. If this released with 35 League characters and a lot of fan favorites were there, I guarantee you this could have blown the doors open with an announcement trailer like, hey, boom, League of Fighters, 30 of your favorite League characters here, boot up, play the game. Hey, it's a 1v1 game, but we have this 2v2 mode on the side to play with your friend because we're not sickos, we're not insane. That could have done gangbusters. That could have been $1 billion investment. It just, I don't know what happened internally to stall the development, but it felt like in 2026, the game was still not finished. So, there was issues with getting to training mode and queuing for ranked matches. I would argue that there's bugs a lot of the time, so I put that into the content bucket a little bit. But the main thing is lack of characters. But the main thing overall, I think the number one most important factor is 2XKO just doesn't have it. It just doesn't have it. And what I mean by it is it doesn't have pizzazz. It doesn't have that X factor. If I'm here, American Idol, I'm just saying, like, you just don't have it. You know what I mean? Like, I it's almost hard to put into words, but it just doesn't have it. And a free-to-play game, a fighting game, is going to need to generate buzz. It's going to need to be engaging to viewers. This game, as it stands right now, I don't know if it's a combination of the art style, the gameplay with active tag, the sound design, the stages, or what it is, but it tends to make viewers' eyes glaze over. It tends to lead to people being very, very bored when watching the game. When you play the game, I think the game is more fun to play than to watch. I really did not like watching the game initially, and when I played it, I actually had a lot more fun playing it than I thought I would. Watching it feels very, very boring most of the time. That could have been resolved by having a lot more characters. That is a way to pad that, for sure. But I think there's a lack of impact with the sound design. There's a lack of impact with the gameplay itself. It just doesn't look or feel cool to hit people, and it doesn't feel badass. Like, there's nothing there to share with a friend. Like, hey, look, I did ABC Launcher into Super, and it just feels impactful and feels cool. It's just not there visually with the sound design, and that means that people do not want to look at it, engage with it, or share it, and that leads to the inability to make this a viral or a game that spreads via word of mouth. So I can't describe to you exactly what it is about it, but it just doesn't have it. I think at the end of the day, no matter which way you try to dissect this about being being an issue with the marketing, with being an issue with the content, being an issue with the expectations, it doesn't have it. And it is so important. It needs to just be like, wow, it needs to just blow your mind the moment you see it. Fighting games, first and foremost, are meant to inspire your imagination, are meant to just wow you, to make you feel like a kid. It's like when you see these characters for the first time as a kid, you walk past that arcade cab, or your friend boots up Tekken and he does a fucking death fist and their health bar explodes, and you just go, whoa, what is that? They do a super for the first time. It needs to have it, and 2XKO doesn't have it. And that's about it. I predict that 2XKO will last for another year. I could be wrong. If you love the game, if you enjoy it, I definitely encourage you to keep playing it. I encourage you to check it out. I think it is a fun game to play. I think there's a lot of issues with it. I could be completely wrong about the support that this game will receive going forward. I don't want to be all doom and gloom. A lot of great people I know worked on this game, and they did lose their jobs, and that's very serious in this difficult economy, and I'm definitely wishing them all the best. But I just wanted to catch you up with like the complete history, context for this. This went on for way too long, but maybe now, if you watch this all the way through, you can understand a little bit of what happened to 2XKO. Thanks for watching. Peace.